Hello, and welcome to the Maintenance and Reliability Professional Review course, presented by Mastering Maintenance. This comprehensive 9-lesson program is designed to give you a detailed overview of everything you need to build a high-performance maintenance organization. Today, we'll be spending some time on Lesson 1, Business and Management 1. So let's begin. My name is Dave Krings, and I'll be your instructor for Lessons 1 through 9 of the Maintenance and Reliability Professional Review course. If you need to contact me for communication regarding this course, please email me at dkrings@masteringmaintenance.com or access masteringmaintenance.com on the internet, and you can participate in our message board for this course or any other course you might choose to take with Mastering Maintenance. There is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order to things. This famous quote by Niccolo Machiavelli is over 500 years old, but you might even think that Niccolo was a maintenance manager in his day. Of course, setting up a world-class maintenance and reliability organization requires change management skills and a knowledge of everything you need to do from the beginning to the completion of an initiative such as this. So, as you look ahead and as we work through lessons 1 through 9, you'll find that we're building a process that helps you avoid the difficulties that Mr. Machiavelli mentions in this quote. First, we're going to take a look at an introduction to the certification for maintenance and reliability professionals offered by the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals Certifying Organization. Then, we'll step into a summary of the Maintenance and Reliability Professional Review course, which we're doing in this case here, Lessons 1 through 9. After taking a look at the summary, we'll jump into Lesson 1, Business and Management 1. So let's go, and good luck. CMRP stands for Certified Maintenance and Reliability Professional. This is one of the premier certifications in the maintenance and reliability industry, and let's take a look at how it came to be. Prior to 1997, there were no comprehensive standards for measuring maintenance and reliability competence. There were a number of smaller certifications, many of them offered by private companies, to certify people for different skills within maintenance and reliability, but there was no overall standard that was monitored and controlled by an impartial organization such as SMRP. So the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals, or SMRP, decided to take action and create a structure that would allow a certification to exist and thrive. The program development lasted until the year 2000, and the first test was offered in the year 2000, and 400 exams had been offered by the end of the year 2003. Today, in late 2004, there are more than 500 certified maintenance and reliability professionals worldwide. Let's take a look at the certification goals. First, we now have consistent standards for excellence, which didn't exist in the past. We have a well-defined body of knowledge that gives us a good idea of what it really takes to build a good proactive maintenance program. Third, we can differentiate those who have mastered the elements of excellence. In other words, if you carry the certification for maintenance and reliability professionals, you're able to demonstrate to industry that you really do have the background to do a good job in leading initiatives and improving maintenance continuously. And fourth, we now have an international standard. How were the standards developed? In 1997, as we mentioned before, the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals formed a small committee called the Professional Certification Committee, or PCC, and they were charged with identifying the capabilities of high-performing maintenance organizations. Upon completing their task, they validated the findings through 400 benchmarking surveys of maintenance professionals around the world. They took these two pieces of information, the benchmarking surveys and their own identified capabilities list, and evaluated the process, defined it, and refined it, completing the survey and building the standards. Let's take a look at the CMRP exam. The exam is owned by the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals Certifying Organization, or SMRPCO, an independent, impartial organization. Furthermore, it is certified by the National Association for Competency Assurance. It is managed through a formalized testing procedure, and the test format is a 110-question exam, closed book, with the use of calculators allowed, but not programmable calculators. The benefits of the certification. First, certified maintenance and reliability professionals have a clear direction for development based on places in the certification where they had difficulties or may not have as deep a knowledge. Second, there's the recognition of carrying the CMRP designation and possibly compensation for the additional skills you have. Third, it's a portable certification, meaning it's not just recognized by one business, but internationally. So as you move through different positions in your career, the certification remains valid. Fourth, the certification eliminates gaps in knowledge by providing standards that cover the entire process. And last, it provides for better hiring practices for companies because they can easily identify those who have achieved certification and know that when they interview personnel that have a CMRP, they have been exposed and understand the process. So why would you choose the CMRP program instead of some other commercial program? Well, first, it's non-commercial. It's independent and impartial, which is important to a lot of employers. Second, it's comprehensive and not just technical. So rather than going to a course where you just learn about how to apply, for instance, preventive and predictive maintenance technology or some high-tech tools, it covers the entire maintenance process from the business and management end of it through process reliability, equipment reliability, people skills, all the way through into work management. So it covers all of the bases. Third, it's benchmarked and certified by industry experts. And fourth, it's sponsored by the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals, which is a non-profit organization that exists only to assist maintenance and reliability leaders and those interested in participating, and nothing else. So you can rely on SMRP to represent maintenance and reliability with no strings attached. You can view SMRP's information in greater detail at www.smrp.org when you get some time. Qualifications for certification. The Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals intentionally did not provide formal education and experience definitions. Because there's such a wide variety of experience out in the maintenance and reliability field, they felt it was inappropriate to pigeonhole people. So they gave some broader definitions. First of all, that you should have experience in maintenance and reliability to pass the exam. And I think they've succeeded in that with their exam design, because it'd be quite difficult to pass without some maintenance and reliability experience. Also, they believe that you should have training in maintenance and reliability, either formally or informally as you've gone through your maintenance and reliability career. Leadership experience is beneficial. A great deal of the material, particularly in the early sections of the standard, require quite a bit of leadership competence, and we'll be talking about that mostly in lessons 1 through 4. Another interesting thing, membership in the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals is not required to take the exam or to be a certified maintenance and reliability professional. So it really is true that there are no strings attached. The certification stands for itself, and I have to say SMRP has done an excellent job putting this certification together, and I'm sure you'll agree. Today we'll be spending our time on the first portion of Pillar 1, Business and Management. This pillar will be completed in Lesson 2 of our Business and Management section of the course. The definition of Business and Management pillar, as outlined by the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals Certifying Organization, is as follows. Translate an organization's business goals into appropriate maintenance and reliability goals that support and contribute to the organization's business results. In other words, we're going to communicate maintenance's needs, maintenance's plan, and maintenance's actions to achieve that plan in terms that are understandable and supportable by the business. Lessons 1 and 2 will cover business and management. Pillar 2 of the standard is manufacturing process reliability. This is relating maintenance and reliability activities to the manufacturing process of the organization to ensure that the maintenance and reliability activities improve the manufacturing process. This is a quote directly from the SMRP guidelines. As we talked about in Pillar 1, we're building upon the idea that the maintenance and operations teams need to partner together and work toward business objectives. We'll continue to do that in Lesson 3 of this course, covering manufacturing process reliability. The third pillar of the SMRP standard is equipment reliability. We're starting to get into more common, familiar territory for maintenance professionals. It's got two goals. First, to assess the current capabilities of the equipment and processes in terms of their reliability, availability, maintainability, and criticality. Second is to select and apply the most appropriate maintenance practices for equipment to deliver their intended capabilities in the safest and most cost-effective manner. So, to put that into a little smaller nutshell, we're basically going to do an evaluation of the equipment through measures, and then we're going to apply the best maintenance practices based on those measures. Lessons 4 and 5 of this course will cover equipment reliability, and at that point we'll be at approximately the halfway point in the training. Pillar 4 of the standard is people skills. And when they say people skills, they're not necessarily talking about soft skills in this case, but comprehensive skills for maintenance and reliability staff as a whole, including skills with tools and skills with analytical abilities. So let's take a look at the definition. Assuring that the maintenance and reliability staff is the most qualified and best assigned to achieve the maintenance and reliability organization goals. Lesson 6 of this course, the Maintenance and Reliability Professional Review, will cover people skills. The last pillar, number 5, is work management. This should be quite familiar to most maintenance leaders and participants in the maintenance and reliability process. The skills used to get the maintenance and reliability work done. This includes scheduling and planning activities, quality assurance of maintenance activities, stores, and inventory management. This is a fairly large section of the standard, and of course, as most of you are aware, there's a lot of activity going on in work management. So lessons 7, 8, and 9 of this course will cover work management, and then we'll wrap things up and complete the course. This is a two-diagram slide, actually. On the left is the 5 pillars model based on the SMRP standard. If you take a look at it, it's almost like a stool with 5 legs, or a building with a roof supported by 5 columns, each of them named as the 5 pillars that we just covered. Those 5 pillars support what we would call a high-performance maintenance organization, and the lack of any of those pillars in a strong form would create a weaker, less effective maintenance organization. Sometimes it's easier to look at this structure in a little different way. Sometimes I prefer to use a pyramid, as we see on the right, only because of the fact that when you build an organization on the 5 pillars, it's necessary to build them in a logical order as they support each other. So if you look at the pyramid on the right, you'll see that business and management needs to be established as a foundation. Manufacturing process reliability is placed on top of it, equipment reliability, people skills, and work management, in that order. It's interesting to note that in most cases, when companies or operations try to build a more proactive work environment for maintenance, they generally attack work management and try to build preventive and predictive programs, maybe install improved maintenance management software, and expect results. As you'll see in the next 9 lessons of this program, this is not a very effective way to get results, and it explains in large part why most organizations that do this don't get results. I think you'll see as we go through lessons 1 through 9 that each of the 5 pillars is equally important and relies on the others for its success. Well, this completes the introduction portion of Lesson 1, and it's time that we got into the Business and Management 1 material. So let's go. Let's take a look at the agenda for Lesson 1, Business and Management 1. We're going to accomplish 3 goals today. First, we're going to create a strategic direction and plan for your maintenance program. Second, we're going to build support for upgrading your maintenance process. And third, we're going to measure and evaluate the performance of the organization successfully. This is going to be a good start for our 9 lessons. There's a lot of material to cover, so let's get into it. Here's something to think about. This is a quote from an unknown author. The problems that we are dealing with will not be solved by the people who created them. I look at this quote as kind of a call to action for those of us that have worked in operations and maintenance, that have actually built maintenance processes that are not working all that well. I'm not pointing the finger at you because I know it's a very difficult thing to build a good maintenance organization, and none of them are perfect. But I want you to just kind of step outside your background and recognize that you might have to look at changing your viewpoint on a few things to be successful in building a proactive organization. And if you look at the quote from the standpoint that you need to be a different person to make things different in your organization, I think you'll be successful, and you'll show up to people as someone who really cares about proactive maintenance and can get it done. So I respect you for getting into this 9-lesson program and learning some more detail about some of the cutting edge things that are out there. So let's get on with it. The objective for today: Pillar 1, Business and Management. This is a little repetitive, but I just want to make sure that you understand what the scope of work is for today. We're going to translate an organization's business goals into appropriate maintenance and reliability goals that support and contribute to the organization's business results. If you want to kind of shorten that up, we're basically going to stop speaking maintenance and reliability language and convert ourselves into production-minded business partners with the operations department. The first step is to create a strategic direction and plan. One of the bullet items for doing that is to identify the sponsor or sponsors for change. It's going to be very difficult to change your organization if you don't have a good, strong, supportive, and authoritative sponsor for the effort. So what would a sponsor look like? It would be a leader in upper management to sponsor the effort. It has to be a leader. That's one of the points that creates a lot of difficulty for maintenance managers who try to drive this from their position. It's so difficult because the maintenance department is generally smaller than the production department, and everything that's meaningful from the board level of a company or operation is driven by production. So you need to speak their language, and you need to talk to what's important to them, not what's important to maintenance people. And we can do that effectively without giving up on what maintenance needs to happen to provide the reliability that production needs. You'll see that very shortly. Next bullet is the sponsor must defend and support the plan. It's easy to say this at this point because we don't really see the difficulty that this can sometimes bring on a person. But changing the way a maintenance department does things is sometimes very controversial. It can be painful and difficult for production people in particular, not to minimize how much difficulty it can create for the maintenance people, but there will be times when the sponsor has to stand up for what's right, even though they're in a very unpopular position. You need to find a person who can handle that. Third, the sponsor must really understand what the plan is and why it's being done. I guess it kind of plays back into the defend and support issue, because you can't defend and support something that you don't fully understand. So this sponsor position is really a special thing, and it's sometimes tough to find someone in an organization that can act as the sponsor. But I would very much caution you not to walk down this path unless you have a sponsor that meets these standards. Without a good sponsor, you're really heading into a bloodbath. The next thing we would need to do to create a strategic direction and plan would be to identify goals and key results to achieve. This can be tricky sometimes because you generally, at the beginning of this, don't have very good measurement tools, particularly if you're a very reactive maintenance organization. But we're going to talk about that as we go along here, how important it is that whatever you stand up for and goals you build need to be based on measures. So the first thing we would do is relate top level business objectives to the maintenance organization. For instance, if a business objective is to increase productivity from the plant by 10%, then anything that you're planning on doing to make the maintenance organization better should be playing against that objective, not against an objective at the maintenance department's level. Second, it needs to focus all maintenance improvement efforts on supporting the business objectives. Generally speaking, most companies have a very short list of business objectives at the very highest levels. Sometimes there are only one or two. You generally don't see more than 10 because people have a very tough time keeping their priorities straight if you have too many objectives. I would say that it's very typical for there to be 3. So just remember that the maintenance improvement efforts need to always be directed at accomplishing the business objectives. That way you'll have support all the way to the top of the company as you go through the process. A point just from myself, Lean and Six Sigma methods are very helpful in this effort because the combination of the two will provide you with just really great tools for reducing waste, improving speed, and eliminating quality issues in the maintenance and reliability process and the production process for that matter. I would very much recommend that you take a look into those technologies and methods because they fit very well with the maintenance and reliability professional standards. Next, we would identify current performance and results. You want to measure your performance using documented methods that are agreed upon by maintenance and operations groups. For example, if you decided that you wanted to measure how much planned work was being done during a given time period versus the total work being completed, it would be a percentage calculated based on how many hours of planned work were completed versus unplanned work. The definition of this can get a little sticky because depending on where you work in the operation and also what you believe to be planned work, the calculation can prove to be quite different. So early on it would be important that representatives from the maintenance, operations, and really engineering groups should get together and sit down and define how the measures will be calculated specifically in great detail to make sure that everyone understands where the numbers come from and can agree with them. I've run across this in the past where you would put measures together like this and have them questioned almost on a weekly basis, and it makes a great deal of difference being able to show a written, documented path for how that calculation is made, and it's quite an eye-opener sometimes when people see the numbers and don't agree with them and then find out that it really is true. It can change their whole outlook on the process, and oftentimes you can gain supporters of the program just because the measures tell them things that they never saw before. I mentioned this before, but it can be quite difficult to measure yourself at first because of the fact that the tools don't exist yet. Part of building the process is to establish the tools for doing measurements, and it may take quite a bit of people time to pull the numbers together in a manual way. So count on that. And I know in certain instances where I've built maintenance, proactive maintenance organizations, it took 40 hours a month to pull the measures together, and I wouldn't be surprised if most operations would see that early on if you're doing a good job on your measures. So making it a team effort might be a good idea. Take the time to establish a real method with valid tools for measurement, though. Taking shortcuts in estimating is not a good idea. It almost never works. Any good leader will tell you that when you're taking on an initiative, similar to what Niccolo Machiavelli mentioned, a difficult task that is quite a struggle, it's very important to create a vision for people. So the vision would be, what would be if you achieved your goals for maintenance and reliability? All of the goals, a perfect world. Well, the first thing would be the great leader needs to provide a vision of the future. So be honest, but market the attainable results. Tell the truth. Some examples might be, you're going to achieve lower costs. You're going to achieve higher productivity. The workplace is going to be safer. You're going to achieve higher quality with your product no matter what it is. Greater job security for the employees of the operation. Very likely to save energy. Higher customer satisfaction due to less variability and faster delivery. Very much higher morale and better teamwork. And the list goes on and on. But don't forget to take the time to provide a vision of what it really can be. And the numbers in reality can be quite surprising, and when you start getting ready to estimate them, it's well worth your time to do some research, because it's very much a possibility that you could cut your maintenance costs per unit of production by 50% or more. I've seen it as high as 90%, and that was achieved without cutting back on staff. It was done by better efficiency. So don't be bashful. Pull the numbers together, and based on good numbers, put the facts out there and market yourself. Identify actions to close the gaps. Well, once you do the hard work of pulling the measures together, it's going to be fairly obvious where the gaps are. So you can start developing some action items to close those gaps. At this point in the game, being that we're just into lesson 1, you don't really have an overall picture of the entire CMRP standards and goals, so it's kind of tough for you to know what the gaps are. But as we go along, I think this is going to become increasingly clear. It requires an understanding of all 5 pillars. This is a long-range plan, not a quick fix. It would be very wise to communicate to the organization as a whole that a maintenance and reliability initiative of this scope is not going to get done in 1 year. It's probably in the order of 3 to 5 years if managed well. And results are not going to be immediate. It just doesn't work that way. We can do some things, and I'll mention them as we go along, to minimize the cost of doing the project, but the results do take some effort, and they lag behind doing better practices by some time. I guess I would caution to try to avoid problem solving at this stage. If you have gaps, identify the actions that you need to take to close the gaps, and try not to let any team that you might put together to discuss the issues degrade into a very deep discussion about real fine points, because at this point in the game you're still justifying your own existence, and you need to make a case first to do the project, and at this point you're just trying to identify the general scope. Gaining agreement on the maintenance and reliability improvement model. When I say M&R, I'm talking about maintenance and reliability improvement model. This again just reiterates how important it is that your partners, maintenance, operations, engineering, need to be involved and all agree on the path forward at all times. Your leadership must support the plan. Generally, they'll support it better if they understand it, so you need to involve them at least at the level of showing them the results and justifying things carefully and making sure that they're buying in. Because, you know, if you really want to look at it in honest terms, they're the ones that are going to take the heat if it doesn't work. So make sure that they're confident in you, and that the figures and information you're sharing with them make them feel confident that they can stand up and defend you. As I said, maintenance and operations must approve it, and depending on the way your operation is structured, your engineering department may need to be involved as a separate group. Okay, the next thing to do would be to create a project description and prioritize. So we're starting to put pen to paper here and describe what the boundaries of the project might be, and the tasks that need to be done in at least a rough prioritized order. Create a clear and user-friendly document. This wouldn't be a good time to write a book. It would be a good time to write a real easy to read, upbeat, very clearly stated case for making some real sweeping changes to your maintenance operation. And it's worth taking the time here to really wordsmith that document so that it's usable and understandable at all levels. Prioritize the actions. Well, I mentioned before that you need to prioritize them. Well, based on what? Well, a good one would be return on the investment. Things that have a higher, faster payback should probably be executed first, in conjunction with the fact that easier to execute tasks should be done before the difficult ones. I mean, you're basically talking about tackling the low-hanging fruit first. Things that cost a lot of money to do might want to be held off until you do some of the other ones to generate some returns. I don't think anyone's under the illusion that doing a project like this won't cost anything, but if you're careful about when you create the spending opportunities so that they're coming after some results have been generated by less expensive actions, I think you'll have an easier time justifying it and getting approval. And then also, the other thing is to keep in mind that the culture of the operation is very important. Probably the most obvious example is those operations that have organized labor may see some actions that would provide a lot of improvement in maintenance efficiency, but don't necessarily agree with contract language. Some of these things can be negotiated, but it's probably not wise to make that the first thing. Involve the organized labor leadership and do what you can to make sure that they feel comfortable and know that the intent of the maintenance and reliability effort is not to make their life miserable, but rather to create stability in the company and make jobs more rewarding and full of variety and lots more training and more technical skills, and therefore really security in the long run. Next, we would create resource, benefits, and key results area plans. First of all, who will do the work for each of the action items? Every action item should be clearly defined as to which departments and which individuals would need to participate, and if possible, a rough estimate of how much time we're talking about requiring from each individual and the time frame that it would be executed. Second, what will be the payback for the operation? Each of the action items is probably going to have a different benefit structure. Some things will be just a savings from reduced costs to do maintenance. Some things might create better productivity in the operation, better quality. Certainly doing planning and scheduling is going to improve safety. It's going to protect the environment, as the process is going to be disrupted less if you're doing an operation that has environmental concerns. So many of those things that you might not think of as a payback are there, so I encourage you to take the time to look at all of the benefits that can be achieved by doing proactive maintenance. Last, how does each action item support the core business objectives of the operation and the key results areas? If you have good access to the business objectives, which is really vital to building this justification to go ahead and build a strategic direction and plan for maintenance improvement, you need to know what the company's leadership wants to achieve, and just make sure that you keep tying into that repetitively. You can't say it enough, and I think your success level is going to be much greater. As I mentioned in the slide previous, you need to develop an implementation schedule. I would highly recommend the use of Gantt charts. They're very effective, they're easily understood. Most leaders that have a background in any kind of business, engineering, or project management will easily be able to understand Gantt charts. If you've never seen one before, they're basically a bar chart that shows each task on kind of a calendar view, and shows a bar that indicates the start and finish time of the project. Microsoft Project is set up in this manner, as well as many other programs including Primavera. We'll talk about those a little bit later, but it doesn't really matter what the software is. You could do it with a pencil and paper, but Gantt charts are really a good tool, and it also gives you the ability to track reality against what you estimated. Second, remember to consider other time demands. Most operations do not just do one initiative at a time. Everyone's got other demands. You have to do your normal work. Early on in the initiative, most maintenance operations are quite reactive, and there are breakdowns and other things that interrupt the operation. You need to count on that continuing even after you start making changes, and it could even get worse for a period of time as people are learning. So remember to consider other time demands. If people need time to do meetings and training, and maybe you're doing things with your process, you need to make sure that all of that's accounted for in the implementation schedule. Be realistic. Last, hold everyone accountable to the schedule. As sad as this sounds, most of the time, in my experience, when you start working on a strategic direction and plan, the people that will have the most difficult time staying on schedule will be the leaders. Leaders tend to be working at what you might call the 30,000 foot level, with a lot of irons in the fire at a given time, trying to solve problems in different portions of the operation. So when they commit to do something, it can be hard for them to stay on track because they aren't working on just that. So I would encourage you to make sure that everyone understands what their responsibilities are, they agree with the schedule, and there's some mechanism in the process for monitoring, checking up on the folks and making sure that they have help if they need it, and if they fall behind, there's a backup plan to make sure that their tasks get completed. Continuing on with the strategic direction and plan, you need to achieve management review and approval. You've spent the time and done the hard work to collect information and measures and provide a gap analysis between what is and what should be in the maintenance operation. And now it's time to pull together everything, all of the documents that you built, explaining what you found and what you'd like to do, your action items, and your implementation schedule in its proposal form, and take that to the management team and go over it with them in whatever the appropriate detail might be in your operation to get written approval for the strategy. This is really key because you really haven't even started the project yet because you don't have approval to make any changes. You're just scoping out what the opportunities might be. So getting this written approval is really the first step in getting the ball rolling. This would be the best time to also ensure that there is airtight support at all levels. If you work in an operation that has levels above and beyond your site, it's quite important that the top management at your site communicates the project and the program to the leadership at the top levels of the company to make sure that they understand what's happening, why it's happening, all the hard work you guys have done, and you never know, it could generate some more interest at other plants too. So just make sure that you do that, because if the top management in the company doesn't understand what's going on and there are any difficulties whatsoever, you could get sidetracked in a real hurry. The next step in creating a strategic direction and plan is to communicate the plan to gain buy-in. This, of course, is assuming that your leadership approved the plan, but you know, at this point in the game, if they didn't approve it, you're all done. So assuming that you were successful in justifying going forward with your strategic direction, this communication portion is very important. The first thing is the approved plan must be communicated to the site. Everyone working in the operation is going to be affected by changes that you make to the maintenance and reliability process, from workers on the floor that run into problems and would request work, all the way up to the plant manager. So a very well constructed, efficient and informative communication should be crafted and presented to everyone that is a stakeholder in the operation. Third, leave no doubt that the plan is permanent and here to stay. In a lot of cases where change management hasn't been handled very well in the past, workers and leaders for that matter can sometimes get a little frustrated, and initiatives when they come along might at first not be taken seriously or treated as flavor of the month. Make sure that as soon as you start communicating that the plan has been approved and is supported, that it gets supported visibly, and that the leaders at the site as well as everyone involved in the implementation say often and clearly that there is no doubt that the strategy and the plan is going to be executed and is a permanent part of the operation. It wouldn't be too much to tell someone that 7 or 8 times in a short period of time, to just make sure that it's driven home that this is coming and we need your help, and it's very important that they participate. Now that you've breathed some life into the strategic direction and plan, it's important to remember that it needs to be treated as a living document. This plan needs to be revised at least on an annual basis. I found that this is an appropriate period between revisions. Sometimes every 6 months is a good idea at first, but it's really necessary that you refine it annually at a minimum. The first year, you're probably going to learn from your mistakes quite a bit. You may have bitten off more than you can chew. I've seen organizations hit the 50% mark as far as achieving their goals because of the fact that they just assumed that they could do more than there was time permitted to do it. And as I mentioned before, the results don't come immediately, so it can be difficult to keep the ball rolling, because the process will remain reactive and unreliable even though you're doing more things. This is tough on people and creates a pretty hefty workload. So don't be afraid to adjust your expectations throughout the year, and also as you do your strategies annually. Some things are going to become obviously ready to be done, and some things are going to be placed a little further back on the burner because they're not quite into the executable range yet. That's okay. It's usually quite obvious when it's time to execute each of the action items, and you'll get a feel for this as you go along. The first year, try to get the basics in place, and don't set your goals too high, but be realistic. At the annual revision of the strategy, you may run into some people who will suggest dropping the strategies, dropping the plan, and kind of just adopting the action items in a more informal manner where it's not tracked on a schedule and it's not driven by dates. I would caution you that usually this kind of noise is heard from personnel that didn't finish their action items and had difficulty getting it done. Some of them might have some issues with buy-in as well. But I'll tell you very plainly that if you do this, it's a sure path to failure of the process. You must have an annual strategy development session to make sure that your strategies are accurate, and you need to have a monthly review of those to make sure that people are on track. If you don't have that strategy and plan, you will lose focus, you will lose accountability, and you will fail. Okay, this is kind of a public relations issue here, but you should present the results to the leadership group periodically. I would suggest sending a very good speaker that has good communication skills and is personable and respected. To speak with the leaders on a monthly basis is a good starting point. Make sure that they go there and communicate the measures and the progress in an honest manner, consistently using the same format every time. Make sure they're well armed to answer questions. Provide information that's both good and bad. Don't just give them what they want to hear. Provide them with where you're struggling. Provide them where you're succeeding. Identify the barriers, celebrate the successes. Your leaders are going to remove the barriers for you, so make sure that they're aware of them. And they're also going to be much more likely to support you if you provide them with a list of successes every month, even if they're small ones, because the leaders are going to have to provide motivation for the rest of the site. And if they have that ammunition in their pocket, they can go and speak with those that report to them and share those successes, and it'll keep people on track. So that's enough of that. Okay, we're going to move into a new realm here in Lesson 1, selling the program to the stakeholders. I know we've already communicated that the plan and strategy exists, and in large part what it has inside it, and also that it's permanent and here to stay. At this point in the game, you're doing advertising and marketing to build buy-in, build support, and just remain very visible to the people at the site. First of all, you want them to understand the strategic direction. They need to understand the why of what you're going to do, or they won't support you. The first thing is, make sure that you have very clearly shown that there is a certainty that the plan supports the business and its objectives. Just repeatedly show that. It should be on the front page of every communication, that our business objectives are A, B, and C, and our maintenance objectives to support those business objectives are D, E, and F. And just continually do that and show that all of your measures indicate that you're going in the right direction, or you're taking action to make it so. Second, make sure that you have a clear link between the action items and results. As I mentioned, you need measures. Make sure that the measures support the action items. Third, you need strong justification backed up with data and facts. Make sure that those that are out there representing the initiative have the information, have the facts, and are very well versed in communicating those to people that have questions or concerns. Next, if you're selling the program to stakeholders, you need to identify who will be affected by changes, their role, and motivation to change. Change management is one of the key issues in a maintenance and reliability initiative. It is very difficult for people to move from their comfortable position in what was to what you need to happen or what will be. In the meantime, they're going to be going through a difficult transition, which is very hard for them to accept. It's almost like a grieving process when a loved one dies, because they want to hold on to what was comfortable and secure for them. And you need to make sure that they have a reason to let go and a reason to move ahead. So find a way to communicate what's in it for me, for everyone, not just maintenance people, but production people and engineering people, storeroom, administration, the leadership. Every one of those groups has different needs and will be affected differently. Let me give you an example. The production department probably requests most of the work in your operation. That's normally how it is in a reactive maintenance operation. So when they request work, if you don't currently have a prioritization system, the production staff probably has the ability to call and demand maintenance assistance on any kind of work, regardless of its true priority. For instance, if the coffee pot breaks in the shop or in the office, they can call you and say, send someone immediately to help us fix the coffee pot. Well, as we go along, you're going to find that these emotional priorities will no longer drive the process as you build the proactive methods. So the ability to call and get what you want immediately is going to go away, and it's only going to be obvious to the production people, not so much to maintenance and engineering, because they don't request a lot of work. So from the maintenance standpoint, you'll see it as a benefit because you won't be getting nuisance calls for low value work. From the production standpoint, they're going to be frustrated because their coffee pot's going to remain broken for longer while you work on issues that affect production. And yes, there's always going to be a mechanism there for fixing little things, but it's just going to be a different culture. So the next thing is, what do you expect from each of those groups? You need to define that. What do you expect them to do? Well, again, my explanation there about requesting work, production staff is going to have to learn how to prioritize based on the criticality of the equipment instead of emotions. So we're going to expect them to learn some new technology and some new terminology, and also to kind of police themselves to make sure that work requests are coming in for critical things and identified appropriately. Third, what can I expect to lose, if anything? Well, this is probably the most important point. If your particular operation has groups that are going to lose the ability to do some things, try to identify what they are ahead of time and give them a chance to understand why that will happen, what the result is going to be, and how you're going to get benefits from them going through that transition, and give them a chance to let go of it. They may show some anger, they may show some frustration, maybe some actual grief, depending on how important it is to them, and then they'll be able to let go and support you. But try to be consistent in your approach, communicate well, be open and willing to listen, and sometimes you'll find that changing your action items will minimize the impact on people, and that's not a bad thing. This slide kind of just reiterates what's in it for me. You're trying to tune in on each area of your operation and each department and make sure that each of them understands what's in it for them, what's going to happen to them, and what you expect from them. It's kind of a good way of looking at it. Continuing on with selling the program to stakeholders, we need to identify the benefit to value ratio for the stakeholder. By stakeholder, I mean anyone affected by the process. First off, very heavily share the facts, quantify the expected results, tell people what's going on, tell people the who, what, where, when, and why, and how of everything that you can possibly do. It's very important. They need to understand that there's activity going on and it's driven by data. Talk about process improvements. Make sure that there's an understanding out there that you may not see it right now, but it is coming, and here's why it's going to come, and here's how we know it's going to come. Be confident, be consistent, show up as a authoritative, well-educated individual that understands the maintenance and reliability process, and you'll have good success. Remember to mention to people that they are going to have a better job when it's all done, that they're going to enjoy their work more. And you might say, well, how is that going to happen? Well, when you have a proactive maintenance operation, you have many fewer breakdowns, you have many fewer surprises, much safer operation. Generally, people kind of know what's going to happen to them on a daily basis and are prepared to handle it. This is always less stressful. There are less injuries. There's more opportunity to learn and grow and try different things, work on continuous improvement. It's just a much more interesting way to work. So we then need to present a value proposition to the stakeholders. Just as we mentioned before, that you're constantly trying to package the information to show people your objectives and why you're trying to do things and the action items you're going to address and how you're going to fill gaps. You're doing that in different formats, and it's going to seem a little repetitive, but as I mentioned before, you need to communicate the same facts over and over again in different formats and in different audiences to make sure that everyone is getting the communication in a format that makes sense to them. So here we go again with another communication, a very important one, this value proposition to all the stakeholders. It's simply a clear statement of the tangible results a stakeholder will get from implementing the maintenance strategies. It's the what's in it for me thing again. Put it down on paper and make sure that they have it there. Keep it simple, but make sure that you take credit for what it will really do. Agree on the priorities for change. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but generally speaking, you're going to do things to change that have a payback first. You're going to pick the ones that are easier to do first. It's human nature, and it also happens to make sense. You're going to do the ones that are most cost effective first, followed by the ones that have higher cost as they become the ones that are remaining and are the most cost effective. And don't forget, take the ones that have visible energizing results and put them in there, because if there are things out there that bother people and they're an irritation and they cause a lot of disruption in the process, if you can clear those up, even if they don't have a great payback on the dollar side, they can have a great super payback on the motivation and morale side, and you need that excitement. You need the buy-in to keep your process alive and healthy. Next, we need to gain agreement on the path and plan. So far, what we've done is communicated that the path and plan exists and what it looks like. We still need the vital component of agreement and buy-in. So we're going to keep communicating that, and we're going to begin to request an increase in the depth of support and buy-in from the people that are stakeholders in the plant, in the operation, whatever the case may be. Show the stakeholders a plan with measurable, logical steps with meaningful results, and then ask them to support and build the program. Carefully understand that sentence. Ask them to support and build the program. To build a program like this requires the effort of everyone at the site. It can't be done by a small group. You cannot wag the dog, for example. If you can't gain the support of the stakeholders at the site, you're not ready to proceed, and you need to slow down and work on this until you do have the support universally across the site. Obviously, you're going to have a few people that are going to really struggle with it, and you need to deal with those on a case-by-case basis. But if you're not carrying a good majority of the folks with visible support, you're not ready to start driving things ahead, and you need to take a little more time marketing the program. At this point in selling the program to the stakeholders, it would be a good idea to identify accountability and champions for change. This is different than the sponsors. The sponsors or sponsor that you selected is the overall leader that's going to back you when times are tough and will defend you from your project getting canceled by leaders that don't necessarily understand what you're doing. The champions for change are going to be the actual people at the plant level that are going to drive the process to completion. So you need to find people in maintenance and production and engineering and in your supply stream group, which is basically purchasing, storeroom, accounting, and in your administration group to drive the whole thing. So they need to be people that are excited about the results that you're advertising, that the maintenance and reliability initiative is going to result in. Should be easy to find a couple champions like that, 1 or 2 champions of that type in maintenance. Engineering generally shows good support. Production will too, but there's going to be a lot bigger span between those who don't buy in and those that do in production, because it's further from their field of expertise. Find some solid individuals in production in each area of your operation, if there are more than one area, and designate them as your leaders for the initiative. You can give that group a name if you'd like. Some sites don't like to use teams, others do. Don't like to use the word team anymore because it's gotten overused over the years. However it works for you, find a way to make that group of champions visible and drivers of the process. Second, and this is absolutely critical, these champions for the process need to be given the authority and accountability for the process getting completed. Generally speaking, it seems like there's always a tendency to give them accountability for getting it done, but not the authority to drive it. It would be highly advisable, in fact almost imperative, that the leaders at the site give surprisingly good authority to these champions to remove barriers and solve problems. If you've wisely chosen your champions so that they're good managers and leaders in the first place, and they know how to deal with conflict and they know how to deal with various personalities, they will use the authority well. But it really isn't outside the realm of necessity that these champions need to be able to corner problem individuals that don't support the program and deal with them at whatever level it takes to get them to buy in and participate appropriately. I can also say on top of that, the leaders at the site, including the sponsor and his counterparts, his or her counterparts, must support the champions visibly. You need to make sure that the connection between those maintenance and reliability champions in each department to the leadership at the top of the company is very clear. And it's okay for those champions to pick up a telephone and call the CEO or the president of the company if it needs to happen, and request assistance with no repercussions and very timely and rapid and appropriate response. At this point, it would be time to gain resources to proceed. This would be staff time. There's going to be some labor involved from all areas of the plant. You need to make sure that you have the proper internal and external skills. Using some consultants for this is not a bad idea. There are good consulting companies around that specialize in change management in maintenance and reliability, and it really is a change management issue. I would caution against selecting a contractor or a consultant that is just a change management expert. Make sure that they understand maintenance and reliability in detail as well, because it's a special case, specifically because you have maintenance and operations and engineering and other outside groups that are all trying to implement the change, and each one of them has different perceptions of what's going on, different difficulties. It's a very special case of change management because the whole organization is changing, but each area of the organization is changing in a different way and is impacted in a different way. Quite different from really any other change management situation that I've experienced. Make sure that you have funding to do the project. Obviously it's going to cost something, and that's got to be established up front that there is funding and it's adequate to successfully accomplish the initiative. We're going to move into another section of Lesson 1, Business and Management, and that's to create measurement and evaluation systems. First thing we would do is identify plant and maintenance goals. Both the plant and maintenance goals, as we mentioned repeatedly up to this point, should be based on the business objectives of the company. So we just want to make sure that we have the business objectives of the company defined, the plant objectives, and the maintenance objectives in kind of a family tree kind of arrangement, so you can understand how they're interconnected and how they support each other. Ensure that each of these goals is clearly stated. Keep it very simple but understandable. It's a key document. It should be hanging on bulletin boards around the facility so everyone understands it. The next step in creating a measurement and evaluation system is to benchmark maintenance against industry. This can be done by benchmarking your site, individual areas at your site, possibly other sites within your company if they exist. You can also do it by using available data. Quite a bit of this information is available on the internet, oftentimes for a fee, through individual consulting firms. There are some specialists in that field out there. Benchmarking can also be done using consultants, which reduces the workload on your particular personnel, but also comes at a cost. Another option that I recommend is to utilize industry associations. For instance, the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals has already done a great deal of benchmarking to build the program that this course is based on. So take advantage of that. It's a non-profit organization that collects that kind of information and will allow you to have access to a great deal of very useful information related to benchmarking. So I encourage you to check into that. There are others as well. Identify specific indicators to track. There are indicators at many different levels. So for instance, at the plant level, you might want to measure output, cost per unit produced, whether it's in tons, square feet, item count, what have you. The quality of your product. These things should be tracked and trended over time. Lagging indicators. Quite a bit of the indicators and measures that we are going to do in the maintenance reliability initiative will show results sometime after changes are made to the process. Unfortunately, many of those indicators are the ones that you really want to receive early on. So there's a little patience required, and also an understanding of the fact that it takes some time for this to happen. Examples of those would be cost per unit produced, uptime percentage, rework percentage, etc. We have some leading indicators. Leading indicators would be things like the planned work percent completed as a percent of the total, schedule compliance, and other measures of that nature. There are quite a few like that. It can be frustrating at times because the numbers that you can trend now will show, a good upswing or downswing depending on what you're trying to accomplish, and the results that make the leaders happy don't come immediately. So For a period of time, the maintenance and reliability effort is going to require people to drive hard and move those leading indicators, even though the payback for the extra work that they do and the difficulty that they go through in the transition won't be evident in a payback for a period of time. And it wouldn't be unusual for it to take a year or two before concrete economic results come out the other end of the pipe. You're going to need to capture and report progress. As we mentioned several times throughout this lesson, information is what drives the whole process, and capturing and reporting the progress is what you need to market and do public relations on the project. As I mentioned in the slide before, because of the fact that a lot of the results don't come from the process immediately, it's very important that communication be kept up and a common understanding at all levels carries through with this information so that people don't get discouraged. So this reporting of the progress, keep it simple, keep it easy to understand, provide only facts, make sure you can back them up, an appropriate frequency. This is a kind of a fine line, because if you're communicating too much, you can become irritating and you can almost numb people to the information. So I wouldn't be dumping great volumes of information on people on a daily basis unless it's in a passive manner, for instance on a web page where they can view it if they choose to, but it isn't cluttering up their day-to-day activities. It wouldn't be a bad idea to have a quick one-page weekly newsletter and maybe a larger summary on a monthly basis, and depending on how much time you have available and how much communication your particular culture requires, you might want to look at a quarterly or annual summary as well. As I mentioned in the past, you need to maintain carefully documented measurement methods. Some sites that I've worked with have chosen to put those measurement method descriptions into the documents that they're communicating the measures on, or at least linking to them if it's in an electronic format. It cuts down on the number of phone calls and questions you might have on measurements. It's something to consider. Create a system to collect and report indicators. The measurements that you make to create the measurement and evaluation system are going to be difficult to collect at first, as we talked about earlier, because of the fact that the mechanism for collecting those measures won't exist in a real strong form early in the process. If it does, then you're ahead of the game. But what I would recommend that you do is try to use automated methods when possible. So if you can collect information from your CMMS or from other electronic means, that's an excellent tool. It also makes sure that the measures are done in a consistent way every time. I would also use standardized reports and charts so that the brand name, if you want to look at it that way, of your measures is consistent and people get used to seeing those documents around the plant or operation. And I would highly recommend a written procedure for how those reports and measures are collected and how they're displayed. Because it's inevitable that staffing changes, people will come and go from your organization. This is a dynamic operation. So you want to make sure that the written procedures exist so that there isn't a problem with the ball getting dropped in transition between the changes in your operation. Well, while creating a measurement and evaluation system, it's going to be part of the work that needs to be done to develop charts that are compelling and easy for people to understand. One of the charts that I've found to be quite useful is the spider web chart. It's named basically because of its look. It looks very similar to a spider web. And the example shown on this slide is an 8-axis spider web chart. And if you take a look at it in a little greater detail, you'll see that most of the axes on the spider web chart are actually the 5 pillars that we've been talking about as we've been going through our lesson. Business and management, manufacturing, process reliability, and so on, along with a couple other key issues which have also come up in our discussion today. performance measures, conflict management, and communication. These 8 would be very common things to measure at the 30,000 foot level in your system, and they might be things that you'd measure on a quarterly or annual basis to record your progress from year to year, for instance. Normally what would happen if you were to use this spiderweb chart is you would do an initial assessment of the organization's development on all 8 axes and give it a score, for instance, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the center of the spiderweb chart and 10 being the far end of the axis. So taking a look at the blue trend line that's shown on the middle of the spiderweb chart, if you started out early on in your process, at the very beginning actually, and did some measurement and found that your scoring on all 8 axes was as shown with the line connecting them, you might revisit this spiderweb chart in a year and redo the assessment and do a quality check to see what your site assessment shows. And you would create a new line on the spiderweb chart, hopefully larger in size than the blue line shown, because the basic idea is you're trying to inflate that trend line to the outer edge of the spiderweb chart all the way around. Now, it's common for any operation to have strong points and weak points. As you'll see in my example, people skills is not as strong at this organization as work management skills. It's very typical of a maintenance organization because work management is where they spend their time, and they tend to be much more skilled and competent in that field. But when you're building your strategies on an annual basis, you're trying to bring all of these abilities and competencies up. And if you see a flat spot on one side of the spiderweb chart on a particular skill point, you might want to consider spending more time on that on the next go-round of strategies to bring it back up to speed with the rest. So, interesting tool. You don't see it very often, but it's very useful. Identify owners for measures and key performance indicators. We've talked about this a few times already. It's going to be important early in the project to spread the workload for doing measures, as they're going to be difficult to collect. They're going to be pulled from many different sources, and you may not have an electronic system to collect information at all. So I would highly suggest you spread the workload. It's going to be a fairly large workload, and if a single person is responsible for it, you're going to struggle. Second, as you assign tasks for measurement, try to place measures with personnel that already understand what the measures are about. Measure what you know. It's going to be much easier to catch errors. It's going to be easier to do analysis. The measures are going to be easier to defend if they're collected by someone who is the expert at the site. Third, establish expectations for timeliness and accuracy. If you're doing weekly measures and 1 or 2 of the folks that are pulling the measures together aren't providing the measures on schedule, you're going to end up with measures in the wrong week, which are pretty useless to people and cause a lot of frustration. So just make sure that everyone works in a timely manner. If they can't, find a way to help them. And then also make sure that the accuracy of your measures is good. Don't estimate. Collect the information, follow the procedure that you put together, do the measures the same exact way every time, because if you do ever report information that is not correct, that is not well backed by facts, it will be questioned, and the credibility of your project is going to be at stake. Review the report and identify change actions. Now would be the time when your measures are pulled together and your reporting is solid, and you know that the measures are done in an accurate, consistent manner. You can start taking some action. This is a milestone in the lesson, because if you didn't have measurements before, almost all decisions had to be based on emotion or guessing. At this point, you would have measurement tools available to you that would allow you to manage based on facts. This is a key. You can't build a reliable organization without information to manage with. Now you have it. Congratulations. Second, resist the urge to react without facts. It's going to be a change management issue for people to switch from their old mode of operation, which is to make decisions based on basically guessing, to working with facts only. Encourage people to make the change, make a clean break, and don't use emotional decision making any longer. Third, expect the measures to uncover unexpected causes for problems. This is one of the big benefits of measuring. There might be some commonly held beliefs in your organization that certain things are happening for a particular reason. The measurements are very likely to uncover information that will show you that the cause is not necessarily what people believed it to be. This is one of the things that root cause failure analysis gives you. And in its very basic form, you'll find that just raw measurement is going to give you a new view into a world of your operation that will give you very surprising results. Well, we're at the end of Lesson 1, Business and Management 1, so let's take a look at a summary. The first thing we did today was cover the history of the Maintenance and Reliability Professional Certification, which is a product of the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals and its certifying organization. Second, we looked at the 5 pillars of maintenance excellence as outlined in the body of knowledge built by the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals. And that included, of the 5 pillars, business and management, manufacturing process reliability, equipment reliability, people skills, and work management. The remaining 8 lessons of this course will cover all of the details of the 5 pillars. Today's lesson, Lesson 1, Business and Management 1, covered 3 key points. First, how to create a strategic direction and plan. You now have a good, solid understanding and an outline of how you can create a strategic direction and plan at your site or operation. Second, we discussed the importance of selling the program to the stakeholders, doing the public relations and communication and marketing required to gain buy-in for the strategic direction and plan. Third, we discussed creating a measurement and evaluation system for managing the program. This measurement and evaluation system is going to be built upon as we go through lessons 1 through 9, and as a result, in the end, you'll have a very comprehensive, large-scale measurement and evaluation system that you can use to manage the business. So let's take a quick look ahead to Lesson 2, Business and Management 2. The next lesson will focus on 5 key points. First, managing the risks of change. Second, constructing a business case for making change. Third, communication skills and methods. Fourth, planning and budgeting project resources. And fifth, maintenance and operations performance agreements and specifications. Congratulations, you've completed Lesson 1 of 9. We look forward to speaking with you again in Lesson 2. Have a good day.